all you ghosts with the most. Welcome back to this week's uh part edition of our Halloween horror month. And this month we are going under the theme of Tell Me a Story. So we got another anthology film to talk about. This time we are talking about the 1993 made for pay TV horror film John Carpenter's Body Bags. Now, this is actually kind of the closest we ever got at the time to an actual rival for Tales from the Crypt. This was put together at Showtime. They wanted their own Tales from the Crypt, and they reached out to John Carpenter, who had just come off of the lackluster film, and I think more of the fun was like how much he hated making Memoirs of an Invisible Man, and so he kind of jumped back on this like horror train to not only kind of executive produce and to direct two of our three segments here, but to also take on the role of this version of this movie's Crypt Keeper. He plays the morgue attendant. Um, and really, one of the best parts of this whole movie is kind of watching John Carpenter have fun, because it doesn't happen very often. He's my entire life and like the years beyond that was always 70 years old and always extremely grumpy looking. So it was nice to see him kind of cut loose and have fun here. Um, while again another TV movie uh, that unfortunately did not make it to series, uh, Showtime would, just to kind of give you before we get into the movie, Showtime would kind of get their own version of Tales from the Crypt a couple years later with The Hunger, which you haven't seen that show, is interesting. Ran for 2 seasons. First season was hosted by Terrence Stamp. Um, Second season was hosted by David Bowie, of course, who was in the movie The Hunger, and is a series I really should go revisit, I should say. Um, it was interesting because it felt like Showtime was like, well, we don't have the strength of the EC comic stories or a Crypt Keeper esque character, so let's lean into another show. Let's do a little bit of let's strongly mix Tales from the Crypt with the Red Shoe Diaries, because many of the episodes of The Hunger I remember because they're very sexy. Not so much here in John Carpenter's Body Bags. Um, like I said, we have three stories with this one, plus kind of the wraparound. It's more of just John Carpenter as this morgue attendant, um, kind of introing each story. And then the twist of the end is, of course, he's a corpse himself. And it's really interesting. Like, you see him like drinking like martinis with formaldehyde and stuff like that. Again, John Carpenter is having a blast, and so it's really fun to watch. He directed two of these three segments, with the third being directed by the late great Toby Hooper. So let's start with our first segment, The Gas Station. This one's directed by Carpenter. Honestly, I think this is my favorite segment of the movie. I think it is probably the strongest. It definitely has the most cameos. This one it stars Alex Decter, uh, the great Robert Carradine, um, who I love when he just randomly pops up and stuff. It's been a long, of course he was in Revenge of the Nerds and things like that. But when he randomly popped up in Long Legs this year, it was super good to see him in that. Sam Raimi's in this. Uh, Jason Oh my goodness, what's his name? He's in like every Carpenter movie. Uh, Wes Craven pops up as this weird like drunk may or may not be doing horse. The great Buck Flowers. Like everybody, so many great cameos in this one. And this is kind of a prototypical last shift where we have this new character. She's a college student, and this is her first night at this job. It's this all night gas station with like she's in like the weird like ticket booth enclosed area where she takes the money, and it's her first night in the gig, and there's the madman on the loose, and so each potential customer could be the madman, and it's just red herring city. They're Everybody's great. They're all playing these weird red herrings. They all play it up. It's fantastic. I honestly don't want to spoil when we find out who the maniac is, because I think it's done really effectively. So I'll probably give the least amount of spoilers in this story. Again, the acting from Wes Craven is great. He's like walking around looking just strung out, man. And then Buck Flowers, of course, playing. You're not gonna believe this. He plays a hobo. Um, uh, Robert Carradine as the gas station, like the boss. Sam Raimi as just like he's always playing like a good old boy. Um, Kind of his good old boy kind of character shtick from The Stand as well, like we talked about with Matt Frewer. I love this segment. I think it's great. It definitely is one that feels the most like it belongs in like that top tier anthology story segments. I don't even like I said I don't even want to get into spoilers of it because I think you should totally check. If nothing else, check out this segment of the film. I think it's a great segment. The second segment, which was also directed by Carpenter, is definitely leaning far more into black comedy. It's also the weirdest segment. It is entitled Hair, and it stars Stacy Keach, David Warner, Sheena Easton, Deborah Herring. And if you know the movie that came out, well, like probably like 13 years ago, that kind of like went under the radar, but it's actually a really kind of good movie called Clown. Or if you're really cool, um, a mixture of that movie and this story is an episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Then you kind of know where this is going. Stacey Keach plays a balding man who doesn't want to be bald. Wigs and sprays and all this stuff won't work, so he sees an ad for this doctor with this new super prototype hair situation, surgery, operation, whatever you will. And he goes and gets it, and he's given this long mane of hair, but the hair won't stop growing uh, until he looks like the Shaggy Dog. And then you get the reveal that the hair is alive. Each follicle of hair is its own creature. And then the big twist of this story is that David Warner and Deborah Herring are aliens, and it's revealed a la kind of like Riff Raff and uh, the maid character from Rocky Horror, that they're aliens, and they're essentially just these worms and these hair follicle worms, and they have been looking for a place to live. And as it turns out, human brains are the best place to receive sustenance, and we humans care about our hair, and so we're giving them the keys to the restaurant, if you will. It's a goofy one. Stacey Keach plays it super serious. Um, there's so much gags before the hair transplant where like he's trying all these different hair things to keep his hair. that are really funny. And then just like him be like, my hair won't stop growing, and like it's growing out of his face, and um, it's so goofy, especially after because well, there's a lot of goofy stuff in the gas station. To me, it plays more like a conventional scary story. This one immediately following it is weird because this one does have so much odd black humor in it. It makes sense going into our third story because our third story is dark, even if it is a story you've seen a million times, and that is the one that Toby Hooper directed. It is called The Eye. It stars Mark Hamill, uh, Twiggy, um, the great Charles Napier, and of course Roger Corman's in this one. Nick and I talked about Roger Corman a few months back on one of our live streams. And yeah, it's great seeing Mark Hamill. It's that weird '90s mustached Mark Hamill, but he is the best part of this story. Again, this is a story you've seen a million times. Um, what I'll get to in particular here in a minute. He is a baseball player looking to finally make it to the big leagues, and he's in a car accident and loses his right eye. Thanks to another doctor with a controversial treatment. He is given an eye transplant where he suddenly begins to have um like visions of murdering people. Whoops a doodle. The eye that he is now wearing in his skull is the eye of a serial killer, and it's possessing his brain. Um, Again, this one isn't bad. Mark Hamill is great. It kind of makes me sad that we didn't get more like Mark Hamill playing a villain outside of cartoons, because he really hams it up when the eye fully takes hold. He has a great line where his wife's like, "What are you doing?" He's in the backyard digging. And he turns around, looks, and goes, "Dig in your grave." Like he has great deliveries like that. Now, Tobe Hooper really does direct the heck out of this. The biggest problem is around the same time you get the horror movie with Jeff Fahey, Body Parts, um, where he loses an arm, gets a new arm, and oops, it's a serial killer arm. Um, that movie, to me, the movie works better because it's a little bit longer. So the story of this movie is very crunched, so we go from 0 to 100 very quickly. Also, I love Mark Hamill, and I really want to see him do villainous stuff. But again, it is Mark Hamill. Whereas in the movie Body Parts, it's Jeff Fahey who just oozes sleaze, especially around this time in film. So like he's perfectly good at just being like icky. Uh, and plays. Mark Hamill does the great of shucks to like I'm like like to Jack Torrance at the end of The Shining. Fahey gives you everything in between, just watching him kind of become gross and grosser and grosser. So I think to me that movie Body Parts works better than this story because you are kind of given a little more progression. But again, it's fun seeing Mark Hamill play the villain. This is one that I do wish would have been picked up. I would have been curious to see more of where this was going because Carpenter had said he had signed on to executive produce, and that while he wouldn't direct everything, he would come back and play the morgue attendant, and like that was kind of I think it was setting him up something to do in between his films, and sadly we never got that because again Carpenter is as this character is watching him have a lot of fun, um, and this is one that was kind of lost for a while, and then Shout Factory did it on Blu-ray a few years ago. I know I should turn up the lights if I'm going to showcase stuff, but I think it's great. It's a really fun anthology. It's just weird to see all these kind of like failed TV movie. At least with this one, it is for Showtime, so you do get all the blood and guts and all that good stuff. Uh, and I just I don't think there'll ever be another something like Tales from the Crypt. There were some other great ones, but that show just does everything so perfectly in its time, much like Twilight Zone did in the 60s. You know, Showtime also had the Outer Limits reboot in the 90s. I like that a lot too. I just love that this like decade was so full of just anthology things. But we're gonna wrap up our October with what many critically consider to be the greatest anthology film of all time. So we're going to put that to the test. We are talking about the Japanese film Kwaidan, which is Japanese translated into ghost stories. Roger Ebert quoted this as one of the most beautiful films he's ever seen. It was listed as one of the greatest movies on his list. And this is again a Japanese horror anthology from the 60s. So we're going to end a little highbrow, baby. It's like going to the dentist the day before Halloween, so we can make sure we splurge on all the treats. But I'm looking forward to diving into that film with you guys next week. But if you can't get enough John Carpenter, make sure you join us this Saturday. Nick and I, believe it or not, have each spent multiple podcast episodes on our own breaking down John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and In the Mouth of Madness. Over 30 years of friendship, and we've never sat down and talked about them together. So this month, to celebrate Halloween, we are going to deep dive into the John Carpenter Apocalypse trilogy, plus a few surprises. So you do not want to miss that this Saturday, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, twitch.tv/the Movie-Club Emporium. It's going to be fun. And then join me next week as we talk about Kwaidan. Until then, maybe we just leave apples out of the fruit rotation until Halloween's over. Your bleeding gums will thank you. Bye.